My hearing returned the same day my daughter called me a burden. I was supposed to be resting, grateful for her care during my sudden deafness. Instead, I stood behind the kitchen wall, listening to her plan my disappearance, like I was some expired coupon she couldn't wait to throw out. They laughed, my daughter and her husband, as they discussed nursing homes, insurance payouts, renovations to my home. My home. I should have walked in and screamed. I should have packed my bags and vanished. But instead, I smiled, because in that moment, I realized silence had given me more than solitude. It had given me invisibility. And invisibility? That's power. They thought I couldn't hear them. They were wrong. Now they're about to find out what happens when the old woman they dismissed stops pretending to be deaf and starts listening very, very closely. For 62 years, Evelyn Harper had built her life around one constant, her daughter, Melissa. She had worked night shifts at the diner, cleaned office buildings before sunrise, and sewn Melissa's Halloween costumes by hand. When Evelyn's husband passed away 20 years ago, she never remarried. Her world shrank to one person, her only child, her purpose. The silence began unexpectedly. A routine ear surgery to relieve chronic pressure ended with a complication: temporary sensorineural hearing loss. The doctors reassured her it could resolve within weeks, but in the meantime, Evelyn was plunged into a soundless world. She thought the silence would break her. Instead, it brought her Melissa. When Evelyn came home from the hospital, Melissa insisted on moving in. "You shouldn't be alone like this," she said, her hands gently pressing a throw pillow behind Evelyn's back. "Let me take care of you, Mom." Evelyn, still groggy from painkillers and the disorienting quiet, had nodded with misty eyes, watching Melissa bustle around the kitchen, labeling food with sticky notes, setting reminders for medications, writing sweet notes like, "Don't forget to smile today." Evelyn felt a surge of gratitude. Melissa had always been strong-willed, independent, a little distant at times, but this version of her was tender, attentive. She learned to communicate through simple gestures and written notes. They shared tea in the afternoons, Melissa reading aloud from her journal while Evelyn followed her lips. They laughed together, Evelyn's soundless chuckle paired with Melissa's bright grin. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt like she had her daughter back. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the golden light fade over the yard, Melissa reached for Evelyn's hand and squeezed it gently. "I'm really glad we have this time, Mom," she said, slowly and clearly. Evelyn blinked away sudden tears. She couldn't hear the words, but she felt them. Maybe this condition wasn't a curse. Maybe it was a gift in disguise, a strange, silent invitation to rebuild something precious that had long been slipping through her fingers. She remembered the long years of distance, holidays shortened by rushed visits, phone calls dwindling from weekly to occasional. The daughter who had once clung to her leg on the first day of kindergarten had grown into a woman too busy for motherly advice. Evelyn had tried not to take it personally. Children grow, lives change, but still, she had missed her. Now Melissa was back, present, patient, engaged. She made Evelyn feel seen again. Evelyn began to keep a little journal of gratitude. On one page she wrote, "Melissa cut flowers from the backyard today and arranged them in Mom's old vase. She said they reminded her of when she was little. I almost cried." On another, "She baked banana bread this morning. The house smelled like Saturday mornings from 1995. In a world without sound, Evelyn was rediscovering texture, light, and memory. More importantly, she was rediscovering love, the kind that only happens when someone chooses to stay. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, Evelyn would drift into memory, images blooming like faded photographs in a sunlit attic. She was 25 when she gave up her scholarship to stay home with newborn Melissa. Her professors were disappointed, her mother furious, but Evelyn never regretted it, not even when she was scrubbing motel bathtubs at 6 in the morning, then changing into her waitress uniform for the lunch rush, only to end her day stacking boxes at the shipping warehouse. 3 jobs, 1 goal. Melissa would never know lack the way Evelyn had, and Melissa hadn't. ballet lessons, summer camps, a decent used car on her 16th birthday. Evelyn gave everything, even the parts of herself she didn't know she had. Now, years later, unable to hear the world outside her thoughts, Evelyn found strange comfort in those memories. She'd lived for her daughter, and now her daughter had come home to return the care. One afternoon, Evelyn was folding laundry while Melissa organized papers at the dining table. The soft rustle of cotton, the scent of lavender detergent. Small anchors in Evelyn's silent world. Melissa tapped her arm gently, holding up a notepad. "Mom, have you ever updated your will?" Evelyn blinked, surprised by the question. Melissa scribbled quickly, "Just thinking about future stuff. No rush, but maybe it's something to do while you're recovering?" Evelyn took the note and smiled, her fingers brushing Melissa's wrist in thanks. It seemed so thoughtful, practical even. That was Melissa, always organized, always forward-thinking. They spent the afternoon sorting through old folders. Evelyn pointed at her late husband's name on the old documents, shaking her head with a faint smile. Time had slipped by so quickly. Melissa made a list of assets, accounts, and next steps. Evelyn watched her, heart swelling. She's so grown now, she thought, so capable. Later that night, Evelyn lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun lazily above her. The house was quiet. Melissa already asleep in the guest room. Evelyn pressed her hand to her chest, overwhelmed by gratitude. She'd been so afraid this illness would reduce her, make her a burden, but instead it had brought them closer. Melissa didn't see her as weak or broken. She saw her as someone worth protecting. Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes as she pulled the covers tighter around her. She mouthed the words silently to the ceiling, a kind of prayer. "She's a good girl, such a good girl." The world came back in a whisper. It happened at the hospital during her final follow-up appointment. Evelyn sat in a small examination room, nodding politely as the audiologist, Dr. Bennett, adjusted the device in her ears. She felt a sudden pressure shift, like a dam breaking, and then faintly a sound, a click, and the tap of Dr. Bennett's pen against the counter. "Mrs. Harper?" he said. Evelyn's breath caught. She heard it. Not a vibration or a muffled hum, but his voice. Clear, real. Her hands trembled. She blinked rapidly, afraid to believe it. Then came the sound of the stylus scratching against a clipboard, the shuffle of papers, the quiet beep from the hallway monitor. Tears welled in her eyes. "It's coming back," she whispered hoarsely, the sound of her own voice both foreign and familiar. "I can hear again." Dr. Bennett smiled gently. "That's incredible news. We'll do more tests, but yes, it seems your hearing is returning to normal." But Evelyn didn't want to speak more. She was afraid that if she said too much, it might all vanish again. So she just nodded, smiled, and let them think she still lived in silence. She kept the miracle to herself. Back home, she opened the front door to the comforting smell of lemon cleaner and fresh flowers. Melissa had left a note on the fridge. "Gone grocery shopping. Back soon. Love you." Evelyn sat on the living room couch, listening to the sounds she'd forgotten. Birds chirping outside, the hum of the refrigerator, wind brushing against the windows. Each noise was a gift. When the front door opened an hour later, she heard it long before it opened. Footsteps, voices, the muffled thump of grocery bags being set down. She heard Melissa's voice, clear and light. "He said Mom's hearing might come back in stages, so we still have time." Craig's voice followed. "Time for what?" Evelyn froze. Melissa sighed. "Time to get things in place. I'm talking to Sunset Ridge tomorrow. The facility looks nice, and it's private. We'll frame it as a recovery step, a short-term stay. Then after a few months, permanent." Craig finished. "Makes sense. I mean, come on. She's sweet, but you've seen how confused she gets. Yesterday she put milk in the cabinet." "I know, it's just..." Melissa paused. "I feel a little guilty." "You shouldn't," Craig said. "You've done your duty. She's had a good life. And let's be honest, keeping her here is holding us back. That house could sell for close to $500,000. Evelyn sat motionless on the couch, every syllable crashing down like falling bricks. "She's not going to last forever," Melissa continued. "It's not like she needs all this space anymore." Craig laughed. "Besides, you already got her to redo the will. That's the hard part. The rest is logistics." For a moment, Evelyn couldn't breathe. Her ears rang, not with the absence of sound, but with too much of it. Melissa, her daughter. The same hands that had tucked her blanket and kissed her forehead now plotted her removal like an outdated piece of furniture. Evelyn stood slowly, gripping the armrest to keep from shaking. Her knees felt hollow. Her chest ached. It had to be a dream, a hallucination. Maybe the hearing recovery was causing confusion. Maybe this was one of those nightmares that linger in the echo of anesthesia. But then she heard Melissa again. "We'll wait until the weekend," she said. "I'll call Dr. Patel about the evaluation. Just a routine check-in. But once he notes cognitive decline, that's our in." Craig chuckled again. "Brilliant. And Sunset Ridge has an opening in 2 weeks. We can start packing things sooner than that." Evelyn backed away from the hallway, slipping silently into her bedroom, every step like ice underfoot. She shut the door gently and sat on the edge of her bed, staring at nothing. Her daughter, her only child, had called her a burden. Her house, Margaret's kitchen, Evelyn's garden, every picture on every wall was already half sold in their minds. Her sacrifice had become invisible. Her love, disposable. Tears slid down her cheeks, not from pain, not even betrayal, from the awful clarity that silence had spared her from this truth. But now that she could hear again, she wished, deep in her bones, that she couldn't. Evelyn sat perfectly still, the sound of her daughter's voice filtering in from the hallway like poison wrapped in silk. "By the way," Craig said casually, "I talked to the real estate agent. She's coming on Thursday to take photos. Wants to list by early next week." Melissa didn't even pause. "Great. I'll make sure Mom's room looks uncluttered. Maybe box up some of her old stuff. The floral curtains have to go. Too depressing." The air in Evelyn's lungs turned thick. She clutched the edge of the blanket on her lap, her knuckles white. They were talking about selling her house as if she no longer lived there, as if she were already gone. "It'll sell fast," Craig continued. "Location's perfect and the market's on fire. We could even push it a bit. $520, maybe $550 if we stage it right." Evelyn pressed her lips together to stop them from trembling. "Did you talk to Dr. Abel?" Melissa asked. "Yeah, he said it's doable," Craig said. "Apparently for elder care transfers, they don't need a ton, just a couple concerning observations from someone with credentials." Melissa gave a short laugh. "Well, I've got plenty of those. Yesterday she asked if it was Saturday when it was Tuesday, and last week she put the toaster in the pantry." "That's gold," Craig said. "Just make sure to document it. Dr. Abel says the more notes, the easier it is to justify a diagnosis." Evelyn's heart thudded painfully. Craig's doctor friend wasn't just helping. They were creating a false mental health case. Fabricating incompetence, building a story that would end with her being locked away in some sterile room while Melissa listed her house and cashed her accounts. She tried, desperately, to give her daughter the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were frustrated. Maybe this was all just talk. People said cruel things when they were overwhelmed. Evelyn had seen it happen before. Grief, stress, fatigue, turning decent people bitter and impatient. But even as she tried to rationalize, Melissa's next words shattered every illusion. "Do you think Mom has any accounts we don't know about?" she asked, her voice low but still perfectly audible. Craig shrugged. "Hard to say. She's old school. Might have stashed something away. You checked the safe in the study?" "Nothing there but old photos and paperwork," Melissa said. "I'm thinking more like forgotten CDs or a second savings account, something under just her name." Evelyn's throat tightened. Her fingers curled inward, digging into her palms. "I'll start sifting through her tax returns tomorrow," Melissa added. "She always kept them in those blue folders, right?" Craig chuckled. "Damn, you're thorough." Melissa's tone shifted, colder, more calculating. I'm not letting this slip through our fingers, Craig. I've earned this. She's had her time. In that moment, Evelyn's world tilted. The last cracks of doubt gave way, revealing the truth in full, unrelenting color. This wasn't stress. This wasn't momentary frustration. This was a plan, carefully designed, executed with precision by the daughter she had once nursed through the flu with a cool rag and midnight lullabies. She remembered Melissa's first scraped knee, how she'd kissed it better. Her high school graduation, the tears Evelyn had held back with pride. The day Melissa got her first job offer, Evelyn had bought a cake, even though money was tight. She had given Melissa everything, and now Melissa wanted more. All of it, in fact, even Evelyn's freedom. The room spun slightly. Evelyn closed her eyes, steadying her breath, forcing her heart to slow. She couldn't react yet. They thought she was deaf, oblivious, vulnerable, and that illusion was her only protection. Silently, Evelyn reached for the journal she had kept during her hearing loss, the one filled with daily notes and gratitude reflections. She flipped to the back and began a new section. Every sentence would matter now, every name, every quote, every date. She might be 62, but she had raised herself on resilience, and the woman they thought too fragile to notice had just become the most dangerous person in the house. The hardest part wasn't pretending to be deaf, it was pretending not to care. Evelyn kept her eyes soft, her smile warm, her posture slightly confused. She made small mistakes on purpose, mismatching her socks, misplacing her reading glasses, enough to reinforce Melissa's illusion of decline. It was easier than she expected. Melissa had already decided who her mother was now: fragile, unaware, harmless. Evelyn simply let her continue believing it. Meanwhile, she listened. Every morning, Melissa left her alone for a few hours: yoga, errands, or coffee with friends. Evelyn used that time to dig. She found the real estate agent's business card tucked into Craig's coat pocket in the front closet. On the back, scribbled in blue ink, Thursday, 2 p.m., photos plus initial walkthrough. She discovered printed listings for assisted living facilities stuffed inside a folder labeled Insurance Updates. One in particular, Sunset Hollow, had a note: call for dementia eval prep. But the most painful discovery wasn't in any folder, it was in her own memories. She sat in her study one afternoon, hands resting on the polished oak desk, and let the flood of years rush through. Melissa had cried when she got accepted into Stanford, afraid she couldn't afford it. Evelyn had taken out a second mortgage without hesitation. Melissa's wedding? A full ceremony in the botanical gardens. Evelyn had sold a vintage brooch collection that once belonged to her grandmother, family heirlooms, to pay the florist. Then the divorce. Evelyn had driven across state lines to help Melissa pack, watched her cry on the couch for 3 days straight, and paid the legal fees when Craig vanished. And now, here they were, planning to declare her senile and sell her house like it was just another asset on a spreadsheet. No, Evelyn thought, not my house, not my dignity. She waited until Melissa was gone on Wednesday morning. Then, with slow but steady hands, she pulled a yellowed manila envelope from the fireproof box under her bed. Inside were copies of her current will, power of attorney documents, and healthcare proxies, most of them giving Melissa full control in the event of mental incapacity. She placed the documents in her canvas tote, added a scarf to the handle, and grabbed her keys. It was time. Robert Halbrook's law office sat at the edge of town, inside a converted craftsman bungalow shaded by sycamores. He had handled Evelyn's estate after her husband died, and she trusted him more than anyone. The receptionist looked up as Evelyn entered. "Mrs. Harper?" she said, surprised. "We thought you were... how can we help today?" "I need to see Robert," Evelyn said softly, her voice clear and purposeful. Moments later, she sat across from the lawyer she hadn't seen in over a decade. "Evelyn," he greeted gently, "how are you holding up? Melissa said your hearing..." "It came back," she interrupted. "A few days ago. I haven't told her." He blinked, startled. Then he leaned forward, concern flickering in his eyes. "Tell me everything," he said. So she did. About the conversation she'd overheard, about the forged evaluations, about the house and the plans for her placement, about the way her daughter now calculated her worth by square footage and asset value. Robert listened without interruption, his hands folded, his face unreadable. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "Do you want to change the documents?" "I want to change everything," she said. "Will, power of attorney, medical proxy, everything that gives Melissa any control over my life." "And your estate?" "To Michael," she said, her voice steady now. "My nephew. He's in Portland. He visits when he can. He never asks for anything." Robert opened a fresh file. "We'll make it happen. But Evelyn, are you sure you don't want to confront her first?" Evelyn looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "No," she said softly. "She doesn't get the satisfaction of knowing she broke me." Evelyn returned home from the lawyer's office with the strange knowledge that she was already disappearing, even though she was still very much present. She felt sharp edges of indignation beneath the polite features she wore so well. Still pretending she hadn't heard anything, she climbed the stairs toward the study. That's when she spotted the stack of mail waiting next to the phone. Among the envelopes was a credit card statement in her name, addressed to her, and dated the previous month. Heart pounding, she opened it in her bedroom. Each line cut deeper. The card had been opened while she was in the hospital. Hundreds of dollars of charges. For electronics, travel, even a small loan repayment. And the signatory? Craig Harper. Her breath caught. Tears threatened, but Evelyn forced them back. She looked at the name printed in neat ink and felt something flicker. Outrage. She grabbed her phone, slipped into the hallway, and leaned against the closed door of Melissa's room. Inside, she could hear the faint rustle of clothes, then Melissa's voice. "Don't worry, I've got everything under control." Craig's voice followed. "Just follow the plan. Mom will never notice the charges if the house sells first." Evelyn pressed her hand over her heart, breathing slowly. This was worse than she thought. They weren't just planning to take her home. They'd taken the credit they deemed ours. Her own name had become collateral for their greed. She spent the next morning quietly unpacking her purse beside the bathroom sink. She pulled out all the pill bottles that Melissa had labeled with neat handwritten sticky notes. She examined each one, some duplicates, some doses that had been doubled without any medical reason. Melissa had increased the amount of her anxiety medication and added a mild sedative, enough to keep Evelyn groggy but not unconscious, enough to show forgetfulness, confusion, perfect symptoms to report at the eval the following week. Evelyn opened each bottle, read the fine print, then silently took photos with her phone camera while pretending to struggle opening the cap. After she had enough images, she poured the pills back discreetly and closed the cabinet. Acting calm, she wandered to the kitchen where Melissa was packing leftovers. Evelyn asked in her silent way, using a notepad, if the wound on her arm was healing properly. Melissa wrote, "You're doing great, Mom. Don't worry about anything. I've already called Dr. Abel to schedule follow-up." Evelyn looked at the note. She tucked it into her journal. Every detail mattered. That evening, while Melissa and Craig watched late-night television in the living room, Evelyn set up a small voice recorder next to the cordless phone on the side table. If they spoke again about her treatment, about their plan, she would have proof. Late at night, Evelyn heard Craig chuckle, so clear it jolted her senses. "The dosage is just enough," he said. "By the time the doc does his tests, she'll look like she's slipping, and we'll already have the paperwork." Melissa replied, I know. I just feel bad, though. It's using her love against her." She shook her head slowly. Evelyn had late-night talks with herself about revenge, but there was no pleasure in that. Cold justice, yes. Clarity, control. But revenge tasted bitter. Driving herself into the bathroom later, Evelyn stared at her reflection. She didn't recognize the woman in the mirror, but she resolved to take that stranger and make her whole. She wiped away the tears she hadn't cried yet. Over the next 2 days, Evelyn cataloged everything. She printed copies of the credit statement, annotated it in her own handwriting with dates and amounts. She paired each pill bottle's photo with a separate list written by her, noting the original prescription versus what Melissa had given. She labeled recordings. Craig admits theft. Melissa confesses tampering meds. Her grief metamorphosed into action. She felt the old pain of betrayal, of loss, but underneath it was purpose. The same purpose that had driven her to work 3 jobs, to forsake college, to fight for Melissa's future. Now it fueled a new mission: reclaim her life. She stored the printed documents and voice recorder in an envelope labeled proof. Inside the envelope went copies of her new will, power of attorney documents, bank records showing new account access, and a single handwritten note, in case something happens to me first. She placed the envelope into the safe in her study, hiding it beneath the dust jacket of an old biography of her husband. Then she closed the safe, returned to the living room, and sat down beside Melissa and Craig as if nothing had changed. Later that night, Evelyn lay in bed listening to the soft hum of the ceiling fan. She traced memory after memory. The years she'd sacrificed, the nights she'd stayed awake with teenage fears, the fights she'd swallowed to keep her child's dignity intact. And she thought, no one can take that from me anymore. No one can rewrite my identity without knowing the truth. So long as she could hear, she would guard herself with every breath. She didn't want vengeance. She wanted dignity. The first thing Evelyn did that morning was move her journal into the open. She placed it deliberately on the kitchen counter, right by the fruit bowl, flipped open to a page that looked messy and confused. She'd spent most of the previous night crafting the entry, misspelled words, dates swapped out of order, even an odd phrase written twice as if she'd forgotten she'd already written it. Did I eat today or yesterday? Where is Margaret? I miss her. Or is she still here? I heard her voice. I think I forgot to call Dr. Abel. Is he the dentist or the dog groomer? Craig says I wander too much. She underlined that last line twice and added a doodle of a confused face for good measure. Then she left it right where Melissa would see it. It didn't take long. She heard her daughter pause in the kitchen, the sound of paper being gently turned, a sharp intake of breath, then silence. Evelyn kept her head down in the den, pretending to doze in her recliner. 5 minutes later, Craig's voice echoed from the hallway. She left it out? Really? What does it say? Melissa whispered back, barely audible. It's all over the place. She thinks Margaret's alive. Craig snorted. That's perfect. Perfect. Evelyn stared at the ceiling, letting the words settle like ash in her chest. Later that afternoon, she made another move. She picked up the landline phone and made a show of dialing, pressing each number slowly while standing in clear view of the living room doorway. She held the receiver to her ear, then nodded and murmured quietly, Yes, Dr. Abel. No, I didn't mean to cancel. I just forgot what day it was. Do I still need the test? It's about my memory, right? Then she hung up gently and shuffled back toward the kitchen, leaving the receiver just slightly off its cradle. It didn't take long. Melissa was upstairs, but Craig came down minutes later, heading toward the kitchen. He passed the phone, paused, and picked it up to reset the receiver. And the dial tone rang out. Evelyn waited in the hallway. What were you saying to Abel? Craig asked her, voice careful. She blinked, gave him a slow smile, and said softly, He said I should just keep resting. My brain's trying, that's what he said. Craig hesitated, then nodded. Good, that's good. He left the room, and Evelyn sat down at the kitchen table, fingers curled around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. Her heart was racing, but her face remained placid. Let them think it was working. Let them believe the descent had begun. She began placing more mistakes around the house. Her reading glasses inside the freezer, her slippers in the dishwasher, handwritten grocery lists that read, eggs, milk, old voices, remember keys? Melissa noticed it all. She began talking to Evelyn slower, more deliberately, sometimes gently placing a hand on her shoulder while saying things like, Do you remember what day it is, Mom? Do you want me to go over your medications again? Evelyn would nod blankly. eyes slightly unfocused, and say something like, "I think it's October or February, one of the ember months." Craig, meanwhile, started taking notes in his phone. Evelyn caught a glimpse once when he set it on the kitchen counter. Memory lapse. Thinks dog groomer is cardiologist. She could feel their excitement simmering. It boiled over one evening after dinner. Craig poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Melissa. "She called the psychiatrist again," he said. "I heard her asking about the test. She wants it." Melissa's face lit up like a sunrise. "You're kidding." "Nope. She's doing exactly what we need her to." Evelyn sat in the living room staring blankly at a muted television show, letting their voices swirl behind her like radio static. She pretended not to hear Craig say, "By next Friday, she'll be evaluated and ready for Sunset Hollow." Melissa whispered, "We're almost there. Almost there." Evelyn wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and slowly turned up the volume on the TV, not because she needed it, but because she wanted to play her part perfectly. Inside, she felt a strange kind of calm settle into her bones. They thought she was unraveling. They thought she was walking herself toward the edge. What they didn't know was that every step she took was mapped, every gesture planned, every moment documented. She wasn't unraveling. She was writing the final chapter, by hand. Evelyn finished her afternoon tea and sat at the kitchen table, arranging her notes with meticulous care. She tapped her finger on the stack of journals and the USB drive she had prepared. Metadata labeled Day of Reckoning. She would send everything tonight. Before Melissa returned from her yoga class, Evelyn opened her laptop and drafted a simple email to her nephew, Daniel, Michael's son. Daniel was in his final year of law school in Seattle, skeptical of family stories but fond of his Grammy. Evelyn attached the voice recordings of Craig and Melissa plotting to declare her incompetent, along with photos of tampering medications and the duplicate will. She added scanned copies of the credit card statements Craig had taken out in her name. It was the strongest evidence she had compiled. In the subject line, she wrote, "Please hold until I give the word D-Day." She clicked send and leaned back in her chair, feeling a faint rush of relief. Just then, footsteps on the porch signaled Melissa's return. Evelyn closed her laptop and placed it inside the drawer, alongside a printed envelope filled with backup copies, all labeled for Daniel and dated that afternoon. She poured more tea and hummed quietly to herself, finishing with an exaggerated sigh, hoping Melissa would notice and comment on her growing fatigue. She drew the curtain aside to peek at her daughter walking through the gate. The ruse was working perfectly. Late that evening, Evelyn set another plan in motion. She called her lawyer, Robert Halbrook, and asked him to come by the house for a routine discussion about her mental health evaluation, promising it would be brief. She didn't mention the specifics, only that she'd like him to bring someone else familiar with geriatric assessments. Robert, loyal and courteous, agreed. The next day, Evelyn prepared the living room as if staging a meeting. She positioned chairs and placed a small digital recorder inside a decorative box on the coffee table. In the corner, she set a decoy legal pad labeled Symptoms Log with a few scribbled notes in a shaky hand. By mid-morning, Robert arrived, followed by Dr. Alan Benson, a local psychiatrist, Melissa and Craig believed to be a standby consultant. In reality, Dr. Benson was Evelyn's friend from Civic Club days, compassionate, discreet, and willing to play a role in her plan. Evelyn greeted them with gentle warmth. "Thank you both for coming today," she said softly. "I hope we can clear the air." They sat in a semicircle around the coffee table. Evelyn maintained her confused persona, absent-minded gestures, elongated pauses, gentle nods, every movement executed to encourage their complicity in declaring her mentally unwell. Robert began, clearing his throat. "Evelyn, we're here to talk about your recent evaluation. It was suggested you might benefit from a cognitive assessment." Evelyn closed her eyes and sighed, voice quivering. I don't remember things sometimes. The other day, I walked outside and forgot why. I couldn't recall if I'd taken my pills or if the stove was off. Dr. Benson nodded compassionately. "That's not uncommon, Evelyn. Aging does have its challenges. He flipped his notepad pages, pretending to take notes. Melissa and Craig arrived mid-discussion, entering the living room as if they'd been called in to observe. Melissa glanced at the recording box before lowering her gaze when Evelyn caught her eye. Craig himself spoke up. "We just want whatever is best." His voice trembled slightly, fragile, suggesting concern but tinted with relief. Evelyn let them carry on, making occasional, confused remarks. "Was today Thursday? It felt like Thursday, but I'm not sure." She paused dramatically before correcting herself. "Or was it Tuesday?" Robert nodded. "That aligns with memory issues." Dr. Benson agreed quietly. In the background, a soft beep emitted from the recorder. It was capturing everything: their opinions, their body language shifts, the quiet admission hidden in Melissa's whispered apology when she thought Evelyn couldn't hear. Once the meeting concluded, roughly 45 minutes later, Evelyn walked her guests to the front door. "Thank you both," she said. "I'll keep going with the exercises recommended, and I appreciate your help." They nodded and left. Evelyn closed the door gently behind them. She retreated to her bedroom and retrieved the digital recorder from the table. She played back snippets, Melissa fingering the legal pad, Craig's tone of relief, Dr. Benson's reassurance. She pressed pause. She exhaled slowly. On the recorder's display, the words "Meeting with Robert and Dr. Benson" scrolled beneath the timestamp. She slipped the device into the same blue envelope she had sent to Daniel, with clear labeling, "Twist exposure, date Binchkaus betrayal confirmed." She added a sticky note, "Day the betrayers revealed themselves." She dated it, April 12th, 2025. The day the betrayers showed their true faces. That night, Evelyn sat on the porch swing, watching the house settle under sunset light. The silence felt heavy and alive at once. Months of fear, sadness, and preparation had been distilled into this moment. She thought of the long years she'd sacrificed for her daughter, the tears she'd mopped up at heartbreaks, the nights she had gone without sleep to stand by Melissa. Now, in 900 words of hidden notes, recorded voices, and quiet resolve, Evelyn saw that her silence had led her here, for clarity, for truth, for reclamation. In the darkness, she whispered to the empty yard, "Tomorrow, I reclaim my life." And for the first time in a long time, she meant it. The house was unusually quiet that morning. Evelyn moved slowly, deliberately, as if her bones weighed more than usual. But her mind was sharp, focused, electric. She placed the sealed envelope on the kitchen table. Inside, her newly revised will, signed and notarized, leaving everything to Daniel. Next to it, a manila folder thick with printed emails, transcriptions of voice recordings, photos of Craig's forged signatures and stolen documents. Atop the folder sat a yellow sticky note, written in her own calm script. "For your curiosity, Evelyn." She turned on the coffee machine and stepped into the sunroom with her knitting basket, where she sat down in her favorite chair by the window and pretended to lose herself in a tangled scarf. The trap was set. Melissa arrived first. Evelyn heard the click of her heels crossing the hardwood, followed by the subtle pause that signaled she'd seen the envelope. "What the?" Melissa's voice trailed off as she tore open the envelope, pulling out the contents in frantic jerks. She flipped through the legal papers, her breathing accelerating. Evelyn didn't move. "Mom," Melissa called, her voice higher now. "What is this?" Evelyn continued knitting slowly, counting stitches under her breath. Melissa marched into the sunroom, waving the documents. "Are you kidding me with this? You rewrote your will? To Daniel?" Evelyn looked up blankly and blinked. "The will?" Melissa nearly shouted. "You changed it! You left everything to Michael's kid!" Evelyn tilted her head slightly as if struggling to hear. "Is that the TV?" Melissa's eyes narrowed. She crossed her arms, face flushed. "Don't do this. Don't pretend you don't understand. What is this garbage?" Evelyn placed her knitting aside and offered a faint smile. "Could you write it down for me, sweetheart? It's hard to follow when you're upset." Melissa stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Then she stomped back into the kitchen, muttering furiously. Seconds later, Craig burst through the door, car keys still in his hand. "Where is she?" "In the sunroom," Melissa hissed. Evelyn heard the heavy thump of his boots approaching. She turned her head slightly to watch him enter, his jaw clenched. He slammed the folder onto the armrest beside her. "What is this, Evelyn?" She blinked slowly. "Craig, I didn't hear you come in." He snatched the will from the folder. "This is invalid. You're not of sound mind." Melissa leaned in. "You don't remember what day it is half the time. You wrote, 'Forget to breathe' in your stupid journal last week." Evelyn gave them both a soft, dazed look. "Oh, I suppose I do forget things sometimes." Melissa's hands were shaking now. "We were trying to help you. You were slipping, and we stepped in to make sure you were safe." Evelyn's expression turned blank. "That's so kind of you." Craig leaned in, voice low and firm. "You're going to sign another version of this will, Evelyn. One that makes more sense." He pulled a folded document from his jacket and slapped it onto the table. "This one." Evelyn glanced down. "Is that more mail?" "Stop playing games," he growled. "You're going to sign this or things are going to get very unpleasant." Melissa glanced at Craig, alarm flickering in her eyes. "Craig, no, Mel, I'm done playing nice." He turned back to Evelyn. "You're confused. You're old. You need help. And you're going to sign this because if you don't, we're going to start the incompetency proceedings. That psychiatrist already filed one report. All it takes is one more." Evelyn let her mouth hang open slightly, as if stunned. She reached out with trembling fingers and picked up the pen Craig offered. Then she paused. "Is this the form about the refrigerator warranty?" she asked softly. Craig stared at her. Melissa's voice dropped. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be." Evelyn blinked at them both, then slowly placed the pen down. "I think I'll have some tea," she said gently. "Would either of you like some?" Melissa turned away, her hands clenched in her hair. Craig swore under his breath and stormed into the kitchen, muttering something about lawyers and fraud. Evelyn sat back and resumed knitting, her heart steady despite the storm swirling around her. She didn't smile. Not yet. That moment would come later, when they realized just how thoroughly they'd been played. Evelyn rose slowly from her chair. No longer the confused, fragile woman Melissa and Craig had pretended to care for. No more trembling hands or vacant stares, just steel in her spine and silence in the air. "I believe," she said calmly, "you both deserve to hear something." Melissa froze, her eyes wide, breath caught in her throat. Craig turned, narrowing his eyes, suspecting something had shifted, something irreversibly dangerous. Evelyn reached into the cushion of her chair and retrieved a small digital recorder. She pressed play. From the device, Melissa's voice rang out crystal clear. "She's a burden, Craig. That's all she is. A walking pile of liability dressed up as a sad story." Then, Craig's voice followed, unmistakable and smug. "Once she's declared incompetent, we take the house, the insurance money, we deserve that much." Craig's face drained of color. "You recorded us?" he hissed, stepping forward. "That's illegal." Evelyn's expression didn't flinch. Illegal would be forging my medical history and using my name to take out credit cards. She clicked forward to another timestamp. Melissa again. "Dr. Harvey already promised he'll say what we need. 2 evaluations and she's out. Whitefish is waiting." Craig's voice. "I used her social for the Ambridge line of credit. She won't even know. She doesn't read her bank statements anymore." Evelyn turned the recorder off. Silence pressed in, thick and impenetrable. "I have copies," she said softly, "with my attorney, with Daniel, with the Missoula Police Department's Financial Crimes Division. I emailed everything 2 hours ago." Melissa stumbled back as if struck. Craig's jaw worked furiously, but no sound came. You don't know what you're doing," he finally said, voice shaking. Evelyn walked over to the kitchen drawer and retrieved another folder. She opened it and laid out the evidence. Screenshots of his credit usage in her name, copies of forged emails, altered prescriptions Melissa had requested from a pharmacy under false pretenses. "Craig," she said, her voice as cold and clean as winter air, "you are a thief, and Melissa, you are a liar." "Mom?" Melissa whispered, voice cracking. Evelyn turned to her, eyes sharp. "Don't. You lost the right to call me that." Craig suddenly surged forward, hand raised as if to grab the recorder, but Evelyn didn't flinch. She stared him down with a gaze that could have shattered ice. "Try it," she said flatly. "Touch me and you'll be in jail by sundown." He stopped in his tracks, chest heaving. Evelyn stepped past him and picked up the house phone. Calmly, deliberately, she dialed 911. "Yes," she said to the dispatcher. "This is Evelyn Harper. I'd like to report identity theft, financial fraud, and attempted coercion. The individuals are present in my home now. Yes, I feel safe. For now." She hung up and turned back to the two people who had once been her family. "I want you gone," she said, "by the time the officers arrive." Melissa's lips trembled. "Where are we supposed to go?" "Anywhere but here," Evelyn replied. "Take the things you bought with my money and leave." Craig's eyes burned. "You think a few recordings will hold up in court? You're senile. We'll tell them you imagined all of this." Evelyn walked to the sideboard and retrieved a folder labeled Witness Statements. She tossed it on the table. "You think I didn't plan for that? I have affidavits, recordings, photos, witnesses. You're already under investigation. Sunset Manor will be the least of your worries." Melissa broke into tears. "Please, Mom, please." Evelyn shook her head, her voice a whisper carved from stone. "There's no mom here. There's no daughter. Not anymore." Craig stared at her like a trapped animal. "You cold-hearted. I'm not the one who plotted to steal from a grieving widow," Evelyn snapped. "I'm the one who survived, and I'm the one reclaiming her life." Outside, the faint sound of sirens began to grow louder. Craig grabbed the nearest bag. Melissa still stood frozen, tears pouring down her face, mascara streaking like shadows down her cheeks. "Go," Evelyn said. They moved slowly, as if carrying the weight of their betrayal on their backs. At the threshold, Melissa turned, one last time. "Mom, I didn't mean—" Evelyn didn't look up. "I'm sure you meant every word." The door closed behind them. Evelyn stood still for a long moment, her heart pounding not from fear, but from finality. When the sirens faded and silence returned, she whispered to herself, "I have no daughter. I have peace." The morning light filtered through the kitchen window like warm silk as Evelyn set a kettle on the stove. She moved with calm purpose, her hands steady, her breath slow. The house was quiet again, not the tense, manufactured silence that had hovered while Melissa and Craig plotted their betrayal, but real silence, peaceful, earned. She wiped her hands on a linen towel and reached for the phone. It rang twice before Daniel picked up. "Aunt Evelyn?" he answered, cautious. Evelyn smiled at the sound of his voice. "It's me, sweetheart. It's done. They're gone." A pause. Then, "Gone, gone?" "Gone and not coming back, she said, with a tone that left no room for doubt. "The officers came. Craig tried to bluster. Melissa cried. But I made it clear. This house is no longer theirs to haunt." Daniel exhaled, a sound of pure relief. "I was so worried about you." "I know, and I appreciate that. More than I can say." "You're sure you're safe?" "I am. In fact, I haven't felt this safe in years." They spoke for a while longer, discussing the next steps. Evelyn explained that her lawyer had already started proceedings to secure a restraining order and freeze the fraudulent accounts Craig had opened. The police were building a case. Everything was moving forward, but Evelyn didn't want to talk about courts or fraud anymore. "I'm going to Vermont," she said brightly. "Vermont?" Daniel echoed, surprised. "To see my sister," Evelyn confirmed. "Susan hasn't seen me in person in 6 years. I kept saying I was too busy or too tired. Truth was, I just didn't want to leave the house." leave the illusion I'd built that Melissa still cared. Daniel was silent, respectful. Evelyn continued, "But now, I'm ready. I bought a new suitcase. I'm baking her favorite lemon bars. I even washed the drapes." Daniel chuckled softly. "I'm proud of you, Aunt Evelyn." She smiled again, touched. "I'm proud of me too." After they hung up, she rolled up her sleeves and returned to the kitchen. The air smelled of cinnamon and yeast, her second batch of raisin bread rising patiently on the counter, the way she used to bake for Margaret's school fundraisers, for Melissa's dance team meetings. She no longer baked to be appreciated. She baked because it made her happy. The dining table gleamed with polish. She dusted every surface of the living room, aired out the linens, watered the plants that Melissa had let wilt. In a single morning, the house had returned to its old rhythm, Evelyn's rhythm. Later that afternoon, she pulled down a photo album from the highest shelf. Dust clung to the leather spine. She opened it slowly, finding pictures from the early years, her and Robert on their wedding day, arms around each other in laughter. A camping trip when Melissa was 6, her cheeks sticky with marshmallow. Evelyn's old bakery, the smile on her face tired but genuine as she stood in front of the window display. So much love. So much effort. Her gaze lingered on a photo of Robert in their first apartment, standing by the window, holding a mug, smiling just for her. She heard his voice in her memory, quiet and firm. "Kindness isn't weakness, Evelyn, but it becomes a prison if you give it to those who only know how to take." At the time, she disagreed. She believed love could heal anything if you gave enough of it. Now she understood what he had meant. There was power in knowing when to stop giving, when to protect your peace instead of your pride, when to let go of people who mistook your patience for permission. That night, Evelyn packed a suitcase, 2 sets of travel clothes, her medication, a new journal, the lemon bars, carefully wrapped, and the photo of her and Susan at a lake in Vermont decades ago, grinning like girls. She stood by the front door, checked the locks, and whispered, "Goodbye, Melissa." Not a goodbye drenched in pain or bitterness, just closure. Tomorrow she would wake up early, board a train, see her sister, start again. But tonight she stood in her clean kitchen, hands warm from the oven, and let herself feel light. For the first time in years, she carried no one's burdens but her own. 2 days after her train ride to Vermont, Evelyn returned home. The visit had been everything she hoped for. Late-night talks with Susan over hot cocoa, laughter about their childhood pranks, quiet walks under maple trees. For the first time in what felt like forever, Evelyn had spoken freely, not watching her words, not filtering her thoughts through fear of manipulation. She stepped into her house just as the early autumn breeze carried a whisper of winter. The front hall smelled faintly of lemon polish and cinnamon from her last baking session. Her plants were still green, her peace untouched. On the doormat lay a single white envelope, no return address. Curious, she picked it up and examined the handwriting. Neat, familiar. Her stomach turned slightly as recognition settled. Melissa. Evelyn walked inside slowly, set her purse down, and carried the envelope to the fireplace mantel. She stared at it for a long moment before sliding a letter opener under the flap. "Dear Mom," it began. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, about how things ended. I know I made mistakes, and I know I said things I can't take back, but I was overwhelmed, scared. Craig was the one pushing for most of it. I didn't know how to stop it once it started." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. The phrasing was precise, practiced. "I miss you. I miss the way you used to make tea when I was sick, the way you hummed while folding laundry. I know I messed up, but I still think of you as my mom, and I hope one day we can find a way back to each other." She flipped to the second page. "Right now, things are difficult. I'm trying to get back on my feet. If you're open to it, I could really use a little help to get started again. Nothing huge, just enough for a deposit on a small place. Craig and we've gone our separate ways. I'm on my own." Evelyn laughed softly, not bitterly, not cruelly, just amused at the inevitability of it all. Of course, there it was, the apology wrapped neatly around a request. the nostalgia disguised as manipulation. The daughter who had once celebrated her downfall, now reaching out again, just not to reconnect, but to recover what she believed still belonged to her. Evelyn walked to the fireplace. She fed the letter into the flames without a second thought. The paper curled and blackened, shrinking into ash as if the words themselves had never been written. She stood watching the fire for a moment, hands folded. There would be more letters. Maybe a phone call eventually, an accidental visit. But Evelyn had drawn her line, and not even Melissa's most artful prose could erase the truth she'd lived through. She walked back to her armchair, her sanctuary. The house was quiet. No footsteps overhead, no fake sweet voices, no rustle of notes written in pity, just the faint tick-tick-tick of the clock on the wall. Each tick, a second earned back, each breath her own. Evelyn sat down and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. Outside, wind rustled the branches. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then settled. And inside, the sound of the ticking clock continued. Steady, honest, free.